heard you had women dropping their panties all over.
Not quite. Miss TSUS was waiting for me when I got home, Blake. Play spoiler for you.
That's my fault.
She was excited, though. She was excited to see me. I want to start this convo on a different note, though, Blake.
Okay.
I want you and your audience to know how much of a college football sicko I am.
Okay.
And how ready I am for the season and how I'm made for this shit, man. I'm conditioned for heartbreak. We just did we're doing our season simulation series right now. We simulate every South Carolina game. We just finished up simulating, I'm talking 10 minutes ago, the game against Georgia. South Carolina goes down the field, ties the game on a field goal, 22-22 with 1 minute left. Georgia's at the 50 with 5 seconds. Carson Beck to Ladd McConkey as time expires to win the game. Bring it on. Bring on 2023, man. I'm ready. I am ready for kickoff. I'm officially ready to go.
I'm just going to say this. And we don't, on this show last year, we do not call him Ladd McConkey. We call him Ladd Mahonky.
Okay.
If Ladd Mahonky goes for 50 on a game winner, man, it's a hot dog. All right, so let's do this. I do like those simulations. I think that they're more realistic than people give them credit for. And I will tell you this, Chris, I said this yesterday because it was announced about South Carolina going to be, part of College game day week 1 against North Carolina. I called my shot yesterday, and I'm not saying this because you are coming on the show. I picked South Carolina to win. I think North Carolina's defense is so bad that I think Spencer has a really good game. We'll get to that in a minute. You were at SEC Media Days. What was the biggest thing that you walked away from for you through all that experience and talking to all those head coaches?
Blake, and it was a rewarding experience. I'll say this. My biggest takeaway, not regarding the coaches, the players, was all the great people in the building, all the talented creators. It was the who's who of college football Twitter, of college football media, getting to meet so many people. And I was hoping you'd be there, my friend, because we've got to cross paths one day, obviously. But so many guys that I've done shows with and made great content with and work with and getting to shake their hands and conversate in person. I feel like, I strengthened relationships and created new relationships that I'll carry with me for forever practically. But speaking specifically to the coaches, the players, one of my biggest takeaways, I thought everybody was pretty on guard, honestly. I didn't feel like there were any major storylines. I think, for everything that we were talking about coming into the week, I thought there wasn't a whole lot of hoopla. Even Kirby Smart with the off-the-field stuff. And, we're all sitting there thinking, who's going to grill Kirby? Who's going to bring it up? There was one question by Pat Forty, and outside of that, it's just all football stuff, which I know Kirby Smart obviously loved. Blake, obviously getting the week kicked off, being able to ask Brian Kelly a question was really cool for obvious reasons. And it was really cool, obviously, for me personally, being in that room, asking those different coaches questions, stuff like that. But, there weren't really any major storylines coming out of media days. I mean, I think day one, Brian Kelly was confident. I thought it was interesting. He talked about that maybe we're kind of a year away from really having the roster, the depth to really go toe-to-toe with Alabama, Georgia. Not necessarily, maybe trying to temper expectations a little bit, but obviously he knows the standard in LSU. It's winning national championships. And, you can kind of feel it, not to cater to you and your audience, but you can feel it in Baton Rouge that it's like women's basketball wins a national title, baseball wins a national title. And now it's like it's turning into title town. And so now all attention's turned to Brian Kelly and the football team. It's like, all right, it's your turn. You know what I mean? So I thought he was great at the podium, though. Jimbo Fisher made waves on day one when he could have just sat there and said, hey, I hired Bobby Petrino. He's calling my plays. Instead, he goes on some long rant. Well, he's a good coach, and we'll figure out the game plan week to week. And it's just like he created more drama than he had to. Maybe it's gamesmanship. Maybe Jimbo Fisher's ego really just can't get out of the way. Of course,
to rudely interrupt you. What do you make of that? What do you make of him not being able to just say that Bobby Petrino is going to call plays?
Yeah, I think Jimbo's fighting his ego a little bit. But, from what – I'll tell you this, and I thought my buddy Brad Crawford of 24/7 Sports, Blake, I thought he made a great point that you learn a lot more at SEC Media Days from the local guys on those beats. Because they know the scoop. They know the skinny, what's really going on behind closed doors past the coach speak. based off what they have said, and I even talked to a Texas A&M guy this morning for our opponent preview series, and he was talking about a conversation with Connor Wegman where Wegman, I don't know if he meant to say it, but said that, hey, Bobby's calling everything. He's handling everything with the offense. Jimbo's, giving input here and there, but it's been Bobby's show since the spring. Now, does that carry over into the season? We shall see. But, based off what I heard from A&M people, Bobby Petrino's got full control. You don't bring a guy like Bobby Petrino in to butt heads with Jimbo because Bobby Petrino's been around. He'll just walk out. You know what I mean? Like this isn't some guy you can bully around and make him do what you want. So, that was somewhat of a storyline. Lane Kiffin on the final day spending 25 minutes talking about NIL and it looked like he tied one on the night before at Broadway in Nashville. Really, truly, it looked like he came in wearing the same clothes, hair done the same way, like he had just had an all-night bender down there at AJ's down there in Broadway. So, and I was just, what irked me about that is I'm like, this dude has one of the best quarterback rooms in college football. He's got Quinshon Judkins at running back. Nobody wants to talk football. It's all, and I was texting you about this all week. Some of the questions, I'm like, maybe I'm a simpleton, but like, I just want to talk ball. And I know there's people in there, they're writing national stories and they're casuals. And so they want to get the soundbite they need for a story. But I'm just like, how many different ways can we ask Lane Kiffin the same question? Granted, it worked because I look on ESPN, the headline, Lane Kiffin says college football's a mess. But like, for those of us who actually like college football and like the games and like talking predictions and breakdowns, I would have liked to heard him talk about Spencer Sanders at quarterback, Jackson Dart, Walker Howard. On the South Carolina side, Shane Beamer was the same infectious self, really captured the room, took control. I think he's optimistic about his football team. He's also very quick to point out the deficiencies, areas need to get better. I'll tell you this, Blake, I played a game of stock up, stock down on Friday when I got back. Stock down for me is Auburn because I thought Hugh Freeze, and I say stock down because I've seen our guy like Jake Crane say 8 wins. You're seeing Auburn fans, you're one of Freeze, 8 wins, 9 wins. When your head coach is taking the podium and saying, hey, Auburn Nation, we need you to be patient. Like when they're pleading for patience, that tells me he knows that.
Right.
He even said on the podium, I've never come into a season as a head coach with this many question marks. Like, I think he understands that, and they've got some nice pieces, but the roster, it's got to be a complete roster overhaul. And he's doing a great job on the recruiting trail portal, but it's going to take some time. And I think he was trying to set some real expectations in year one because everybody wants Hugh Freeze and Auburn to be Georgia, to be Bama so early on. It's like, hey, let's slow the roll. Let's make a bowl game in year one. Let's build from there. Stock up for me, Blake, Kentucky. Listening to Mark Stoops, Kentucky, listening to Mark Stoops preach on physicality. He was what I expected. He's very good with the media, but he was very much as I expected about, hey, the physicality. We want to win the line of scrimmage, identifying they did not do that well enough. But really one of the reasons I was stock up as well, Blake, is I really took a moment to kind of dive into their roster and specifically offensively. Like when you look at what they picked up, they got a transfer portal O-lineman from Bama, transfer portal O-lineman from Southern Cal. They got Ray Davis from Vandy. They got Demi Sumo from NC State at running back. They got Devin Leary at quarterback. They got Liam Cohen back. They probably got the best group of receivers Mark Stoops has ever had. You're like, this offense might be pretty damn good. If the defense wasn't what gave them trouble last year, it was the offensive side and specifically the offensive line. If their offensive line can hold up, they avoid injuries because I think depth's a concern. Bro, Kentucky could be an 8-9 win team this year. I think they can make a major bounce back. And then, of course, last but not least, being in the room with guys like Kirby Smart, like Nick Saban. I'd never done so. And I thought Kirby was cool, right? That was a really cool experience. But when Nick Saban takes that podium, man, it's just like you can feel it in the room. You can feel it in the room. Everybody's hanging on every word. Everybody's paying attention. Nobody's messing on their phone. Everybody's paying attention to every word he has to say. Nick Saban was a lot more jovial and a lot more, joking and kind of, with the media than I expected, which I had people tell me, and I know, again, you won't like to hear this, but people are saying, maybe Saban knows something about his football team we don't, how good they are, and that, what have you. I'll say this, Blake, I still picked LSU to win the SEC West. You already know that. Your audience knows that. But if Bama finds a quarterback, we might be having a little bit of a different convo if. And I thought it was fascinating, Blake, that the media voted Alabama because it is what, like, you think about it. Again, I talked to you, and I don't know if I'm, maybe you swayed me one way. But I think LSU's loaded. Top to bottom, there aren't many question marks. There's some, like every team. There aren't many. Alabama has a question mark at the most important position on the field. Yet the media was like, I still just trust Nick Saban to figure it out. Like, he's the GOAT. I get it. He's the GOAT. And it's asking a lot to go 2 years in a row to win the West. But I think it's interesting how when we came into the week, most were saying, man, it's Bama. They got the chip on their shoulder. And I get it. They're not getting picked to win the SEC, but like Georgia's won back-to-back titles. What do you expect? But it's like Bama's got this chip on their shoulder. You know, LSU's getting the love. And then Alabama's the one that gets picked to win the West. So I'm like, I think LSU is the one that should have the chip on the shoulder. You know what I mean? So it was, you know, if you're a college football diehard like you and I, Blake, you can find the storylines and dive deep into things. And, you know, there weren't crazy dramatics, but from the football side, there were a lot of fun things to talk about. So those are my biggest takeaways. And dude, SEC Media Days was just a blast, man. I don't think it's any secret to you or any of my audience. I'm leaning as hard into the SEC content, the all-encompassing SEC stuff, as hard as I ever have. And it's just because I love ball, man. And it's an opportunity to continue to talk ball on a greater level and expand my brand. And SEC Media Days was a blast, man. Can't wait to do it again next year in Dallas.
The only chip that Alabama's got on their shoulders is the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl that they're going to after they have 2 losses. Okay. So
hey, I got Bama 9-3. There's your hot take.
Oh,
I've got them. I think Texas could beat them by double digits. I really do. If they don't have that, listen, if they don't have that quarterback thing figured out, Quinn Ewers and company comes in, because Texas is another. I know we made the joke. Texas is back. They got to prove it. But they're another team. When I sat down with their Texas guys, similar to how I sat down with you and we broke everything down, you look at their roster and you're like, bro, there ain't no excuse for Texas not to be lethal this year. I mean, I know they're Big 12 and maybe that talent doesn't quite. But Texas ought to run things, dude. Like they should be very, very good this year. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I kind of feel the same way, funny enough, looking at Texas A&M's roster, too. Again, we talked to a guy this morning.
That's what I was just about to say. Like, I mean, outside of quarterback in the SEC, okay, it's the complete opposite of the Pac-12, but in position group-wise, it's deeper. Okay, from top to bottom,
right.
You have potentially 3 defensive linemen that are going to go in the first round at A&M. Okay, and so I'm like, everybody's like, oh, we're going to run A&M out the building. I'm thinking to myself, shit. If they figure something out offensively, you ain't running them out of nothing, okay? You know what's interesting you did bring up, and this is the question that I'm going to ultimately have in the West, and I do want to go back to Kentucky after we're done with this, is being Saban can only take you so far, though. You know, like Tommy Rees still is not a good play caller. You know, like how far does that take them? And to me, I don't know if you feel like this. I don't think Saban has an answer at quarterback right now.
I mean, I think if he did, we'd know. I mean, I don't think he would just play mind games and gamesmanship and wait to name the guy. Yeah, I don't think they know who the quarterback is. And you want even more evidence of that, Blake. We talked to different people, and I asked 3 different people to name the starting quarterback for Alabama in game 1. All 3 of them had different answers. Like, nobody knows. Like, nobody knows. I tell you this, I'd be stunned if it's Tyler Buchner. I would, because I thought it was so interesting. I forget what show it was, but I was listening to some Notre Dame show or some show where a Notre Dame guy was on, and they asked him about what were Notre Dame fans' thoughts when Buchner and the Rees thing happened. They were like, Tommy Rees, hey, he paid his dues. He's a Notre Dame guy, but like he spent his time here. Best of luck. We're happy for him. They said, the Tyler Buchner thing, it's like, he wasn't good enough to play for us. Like, what makes him good enough to play for Alabama? So I think Tyler Buchner's there as a security blanket. I don't think he's a realistic shot to win the job. If he does win the job, I don't know what that says about that quarterback room. I think it's going to be Jalen Milroe because of what he provides the offense with his athleticism. I agree with that. But I tell you this, it does sound like that Alabama is going to get back to ground and pound running the football. And I mean, when you have a quarterback like that, you have to, right? But I mean, that's their bread and butter, man. I mean, you look at last year, I think they were top 10 in the country in yards per carry, but they were 82nd in attempts per game. Like, it just can't happen. That can't happen, man. You got 2 pass happy with Bryce Young, and maybe that got them out of their flow, but that's what I come back to. You know, I picked LSU in the West because they're loaded, in my opinion, like all across the board. But also, Bama's just got insane amount of question marks. That's what it comes down to. Alabama has more question marks than LSU. They've got to answer more questions correctly than LSU does. There are more knowns. I mean, you mentioned it. You went down the position groups, right? I mean, and I don't think Bama's like a bad pick. You know, nobody's going to be shocked. I mean, LSU does have to go to Tuscaloosa. Not an easy place to play. Like that could be the game that decides it. But I think Bama might have a loss or two by the time they get to that one. So do we see a scenario where Bama beats LSU and LSU wins the West anyways? I mean, maybe.
Oh, that 1,000% could happen.
I mean, LSU might lose one game and it might be that one. So, I mean, there's a chance they could still do it. But, yeah, I mean,
if LSU won the West and lost to Bama, I'd be okay with it.
Oh, I mean, why wouldn't you be? The ultimate goal is to get to Atlanta. Who gives a damn? You can have the pennies. We'll take the dollars.
Yeah, I beat them last year, and it didn't mean anything. So why won't I beat them now and try to go to a playoff? Chris Phillips, the Spurs Up Show, joining us. Before I get you out of here, Chris, I do want to talk about Kentucky. I thought that was really interesting. It's kind of why I wanted to bring you on, and then I want to get to South Carolina to wrap it off here. I'm not. Maybe I just don't like Mark Stoops. Maybe I think he looks like like I don't know what he looks like. Maybe I just don't like Mark Stoops.
He's got this weird hair thing going on where it's like halfway back. That's where the hair begins.
Bro, he really does kind of look like a peacock.
Like, let it go. Hey, like they said in Frozen, let it go. Let it go.
If he would have been on the other guys with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell, like, I'm a peacock, you gotta let me fly, and they showed a picture of him, I think it would be iconic. But you're walking away saying, man, Kentucky might do some things. Why do you walk away with that and saying that you kind of like Kentucky a little bit?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, man, going back to the offensive side, I mean, I like what they added in the portal. That's first off. They had to address the issues on the offensive line. They did so with transfers from Bama, Southern Cal. They got some big-time Power 5 guys. I love Devin Leary at quarterback. I know he was banged up last year. Look at his year at NC State, though, in 2021. He was one of the best quarterbacks in college football. They had a Devin Leary for Heisman campaign for him at NC State going into 2022. Liam Cohen, the last time Kentucky's offense was really rolling was 2021 when he was there. The NFL thing didn't work out. Stoops gets him back in Lexington. Again, the group of wide receivers they have with Barry and Brown, Dane Key, and others, and those guys are young too. They're only going to get better. I think those guys are going to continue to flourish. And, dude, I think back to Devin Leary. I think Devin Leary, after this year, I think we'll be saying Devin Leary was a better college quarterback than Will Levis. Like, maybe Will Levis is a better pro prospect, but I think Devin Leary is a better collegiate quarterback.
I agree with that.
And Will Levis.
I agree with that.
I do. And then you look at the running back position, man. I mean, Ray Davis at Vandy quietly had 1,000 yards. To rush for 1,000 on Vandy, like, you're pretty damn good. And then Demi Sumo coming from NC State, that's another quality pickup. On the defensive side, I mean, I think they've got some questions to answer, but I trust with the style of play that Mark Stoops has, the physicality again, they're going to be solid there as well. So I'm not saying Kentucky's going to challenge Georgia for the SEC East or anything, but, you know, I thought maybe after last year, okay, it's Kentucky. They're going to slip back to 6-6, 5-7, struggling to get to a bowl. And I just have to remind myself that, like, this is not the Kentucky of 10 years ago. Like Mark Stoops has turned this program into a real legitimate threat in regards to, you talk about, I mean, listen, Kentucky's a middle of the pack SEC team. I know LSU, y'all don't know anything about being middle of the pack, but let me give you some insight.
Shit, got us there. I mean,
being a middle of the pack SEC team, like, there's a number of teams. Couple of things go wrong, they could go 5-7, 6-6. Couple of things go right, they could go 9-3. I see Kentucky being one of those, but again, when you have all the additions specifically on the offensive side, that was their Achilles heel last year. When you have all the additions on the offensive side they had, and you bring Liam Cohen back at OC, I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. And again, I was able to ask Mark Stoops about his wide receiver core, and dude, he just lit up. I mean, he was so excited to talk about those wide receivers, and you know, maybe he was just excited to talk football versus NIL and transfer portal. But either way, he was pumped to talk about those guys. I think he believes they'll be a lot better. They're going to get back to that physicality. They've got viable options again to replace Chris Rodriguez. And, you know, again, I'm not saying they're going to win 10 games, but don't be surprised if Kentucky finishes third in the SEC East.
You know what the biggest thing, you talked about Beamer being himself, that I walked away with, and people forget, is, you know, every time they say, well, South Carolina lost a lot, Jaheim Bell went to Florida State. That's all I continue to hear, right? Mm-hmm. Jaheim Bell. And it was so funny because Shane Beamer goes, well, we got in a freshman named Nicholas Harbor. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, right. He just got y'all's ass on that one. You can't say shit. Man, I said this so not. I think you start off 3-4, 5-0 going into the year. Man, South Carolina might be another team that could be the third in the East, maybe even two. I mean, I don't think people realize who Nicholas Harbor is yet, Chris. Mm-hmm. I don't think that they get that this dude, that he's a dude. He's a guy. What do you think about Nicholas Harbor being a day one dude?
Yeah, he's a future star for sure. Blake, I'm trying to keep realistic expectations early just because, he's a football player, but he's a track guy. And the biggest thing for him is learning the nuances of the wide receiver position, route running, right, the intricacies of it. He does that. I mean, dude, here's the thing. He's going to get on the field early because he's got things you can't teach, Blake. You cannot teach that size. You cannot teach that speed. You cannot teach that agility. He is bigger than Megatron was. Like, when you look at his measurables, he's like 6'5", 247 or something like that, playing wide receiver. So with that speed that he has. So to your point, man, I mean, it's a matchup or a mismatch type of nightmare for defenses, and I think he's a guy you're going to see them use him early and often, whether it be in the jet sweep game or the screen game or just finding creative ways to get the football in his hands. I think as the season goes on, though, you're going to see him get more involved, as a true wide receiver. Because, again, it's just about, he didn't go through spring ball, right? So he's going to get in there fall camp. Man, being a true freshman, going to be like drinking water out of a fire hose, man. I mean, it's just going to be all at once. Learn the playbook, learn how to play this, got to be at class, got to do this. So it's that transition, and all the freshmen hit that wall, right, where it's like, you got to push through, and something your veterans, that's why it's so useful to get a guy from the transfer portal because they've been through the grind. You don't have to worry about that. But, I mean, I think Nick Harbor's a future star, man. I mean, I really do, and I think he could be a big-time weapon for Spencer Rattler this year. And the Gamecocks need somebody to take that pressure off of Juice Wells because they know they have him. Outside of that, there's some viable options. I mean, there's Xavier Legette, there's the Kerryon Joyner, there's Amarian Brown, there's Trey Knox at tight end. But none of those guys, I think, have ever had more than like 400 receiving yards in a season. There's nobody really there that's proven. But Nicholas Harbor, my friend, could be that X factor, I think, where he is such a mismatch for opposing defenses that, he could help South Carolina overachieve the third straight year in Beamer. And to your point, Blake, you got Georgia in week 3. You got Tennessee in week 5. If you start 5-0, my friend, I'll throw a freaking parade. I'll be popping bottles of champagne, my guy. There will be no holding back. I'll be smoking a cigar on the show daily if that happens.
Don't say that because man, I came on the show the week that LSU played Bama last year and said, hey, if we win, I'm shaving my whole beard live, and I might shave my eyebrows. Well, and luckily the chat said I didn't have to do it, so they saved my ass. I lied. Last one. What did you think about Harbaugh getting a potential 4-game suspension over a damn cheeseburger?
The funniest
over a cheeseburger, man.
Blake, the funniest meme I saw all day was the NCAA, and it was when the NCAA sees money in McDonald's bags, in hamburger bags, and they're like asleep. Yeah, the Squidward one. And then it's when the NCAA sees cheeseburgers in cheeseburger bags, and they're like awake, right? Like 4-game suspension. Like, no big deal, Tennessee, but Harbaugh, you got to sit out. The NCAA, they just pick and choose when they want to come down on people. It's weird. There's no rhyme or reason. I mean, maybe it makes sense why they didn't, when they rolled out NIL in the portal, they didn't have any rules because that's how they operate. They make it up as they go along. There's no rhyme or reason. I mean, listen, I didn't think Tennessee, a lot of Gamecock fans thought, give them the death penalty, right? Like they want to see the worst happen to them.
Right.
It's a tricky situation when it's like, guys like Josh Heupel, guys on that roster, they weren't there when that madness was going on. So it sucks to punish the people that they didn't really have a whole lot to do with, or if anything to do with it. But to give them not even a like a bowl game ban, nothing, and then you're going to give Harbaugh 4 games for this I guess the fact that he lied is the problem. Is that what it is? I don't know all the details of it.
So basically, they just said that him lying was a reason they got 4 games. But again, he lied. I mean, Chris, he lied over a freaking cheeseburger,
right?
Bro,
right.
Like Urban Meyer was suspended 5 games when he had a staff member beating his wife. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And that's very uncomfortable to talk about.
Right.
bro, but he got 5 games. We're talking about cheeseburgers. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about a cheeseburger.
I mean, I guess the one positive though, if you look at Michigan's schedule, they don't need him. They don't need him for them 4. Harbaugh can mow the grass for 4 weeks or something. I don't know. He'll just take.
Could you imagine watching a game with him, not being the head coach of Michigan, like being with him watching the game?
But like that's his team, though. Oh my God, he's probably going to lock himself in the basement and just all the lights off with like one candle lit, and just I don't know. I guess that's a great debate, though. I don't know if Harbaugh will be losing his mind or watch the game in just pure silence, not even the TV sound is on. He's just watching the game, like sitting like this close to the screen.
One thing's for sure, he's going to be in khakis and he's going to be having a whole glass of milk.
Listen, 100%, he's going to be wearing his game day fit. The exact fit he would have worn on the sideline, that's what he's going to be wearing watching the game. 1,000%.
I don't think I've ever seen Harbaugh without khakis on. Ever.
No.
All right.
Hey, man found his style. He sticks to it. I like it. He's a man of simple taste. I respect it.
Hey, man, I ain't nothing wrong with a good pair of khakis. That's all I got to say. All right, my man, Chris Phillips, the Spurs Up Show. I know that they know where they can catch all your content, but just in case they do not, tell them everybody where they can catch everything you're doing, brother.
Yeah, man. So we're at the Spurs Up Show, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I mean, anywhere you get content, we are there. We air a daily live show exclusively on YouTube called The Daily Crow, which airs noon to 3 p.m. Eastern time. We take questions, comments, calls. So any LSU fans that want to chime in, talk a little ball, talk a little crap, we're open to it. And the podcasts drop daily, 5 p.m. Eastern, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us there under the Spurs Up Show. Also, we have a store, the SpursUpShow.com or TSUS.store. It's where you get all the Beamer Ball merchandise, all the merch you can think of. Clem sucks, all of it, man. We're branding this thing. So, man, Blake, it's always a pleasure to talk ball with you. I appreciate you. And I've been looking at some of the comments. They said I'm the one person that can out-talk Blake. I take that as an honor, to be honest, because you, my friend, bring the passion. And I think I told you this. I've always said I may not be the best looking, the smartest, the funniest, but I will be the most energetic and the most passionate. And I just love doing it, man. I've always felt like we're talking football. Like, I couldn't imagine being boring doing that. How could you not be excited?